Hello, yeah, my name is Mark Emery. I work at Thrive. We're a gardening that works with social therapeutic horticulture. We do gardening for people with a broad range of disabilities and mental health needs. My history is I started off as a maintenance gardener. So before then, I went to art college, then sort of started doing maintenance gardening. I was helping out a friend doing gardens in central London. I'd sort of done a bit over the summer. While I was doing that, the person who ran the company came up and asked me if I was a gardener, and I was there with a rake, a wheelbarrow next to me full of leaves, and some secateurs in my back pocket, and I said yes. I tell this story because I think it relates to the work we do, and often when people come in to Thrive and they put on the purple jumper we wear, they essentially become gardeners. They're no longer clients. They are people who have sort of purpose, and they help sort of nurture and look after the green environments around them. So I was sort of very keen to become a gardener. I then did an RHS level 2. While doing that, I also volunteered with Samaritans and sort of did volunteering at Thrive, and then started running projects working with people with learning disabilities, PTSD, sort of mental health needs and such like that for several years. I now work in the training team where I get to sort of meet people and help people sort of see the benefits of gardening and sort of understand how it can be of use to them. So I have sort of some great conversations, or sort of meet some really interesting people through the work I do, which is nice, visiting care farms and other projects.
Thanks, Mark, for that bit of background. And it sounds like you're a gardener, but also a very multifaceted individual. And I suppose that makes you sort of uniquely placed to see the benefits of gardening and how to bring accessible approaches to gardening and wildlife and nature into people's lives in an enriching way. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to you to talk about the work that you do and how carers might benefit.
Lovely. Thank you very much for having me as well, Aaron.
No problem. Well, you're very welcome.
Excellent. So I'm just going to go on to my PowerPoint presentation now and sort of share screen. So let's see if this works. Here we are. And yeah, so this is Accessible Nature and Gardening with Thrive. Let me put it onto there. There we go. And that's me. And there's the email there. So should anyone have any sort of information they want to find out for later or any questions concerning this, if suddenly think at the end of the presentation or there's something else I'd like to know, please do write and we can help with that. So Thrive and what we do, as I say, we sort of generally do working with people with a broad range of different disabilities. We work across 3 main sites running projects. These are Trunkwell, which is up in Reading, that's our main office. From there, we mostly work with people with learning disabilities, as well as sort of, people with sight impairment and such like that. We have lots of different gardens there. So I think lots of our client gardens there have different sort of plots of land. They have like a metre squared garden each, as well as like a big glass house. We have a big field where we can grow on vegetables. We can sort of sell them on to the general public as well as sort of show gardens, so we can sort of demonstrate how we can sort of work effectively with children, people sort of in old age and sort of other physical disabilities and sight impairment as well. We then have Battersea Park, where I used to work, where again we've got a big space there in the herb garden where we sort of grow lots of vegetables and grow plants on for sale. We've got an Old English garden where we grow herbaceous perennials and lots of sort of things that come up during the summer and then generally sort of we cut back during the winter. And sort of a pond, and so it's a nice sort of relaxing sort of area to go and sit in, as well as sort of run qualification groups from there as well. We've also got King's Heath up in Birmingham, which is the old BBC gardens. And then from there we've worked with, again, ex-service personnel, and I think we primarily work with schools. We've also developed an information service, which I sort of took part in helping. So that's an online service, or online forum you can go to. It's called Get Gardening, if you sort of want to make a note of that perhaps. And it's to offer accessible gardening information for people. So we try to think of the way we can sort of get people gardening information. I think the RHS website already exists, so that's a good place for us. We want to know how we can sort of, within Thrive, differentiate what we do to help people out. Ways we looked at that was mostly through accessibility. So we thought about physical accessibility and how people can sort of therefore do gardening who might have issues with fine motor skills. So instead of sort of tying up string for a bird feed, instead we can use freezer bag clips and such like that. We also thought about cognitive accessibility. So people sort of not using too much jargon in the language you use, and also sort of making sure we can break down steps to gardening so lots of people can understand it and not feel sort of like it's too much, or sort of that these are tasks that they won't be able to succeed in. which also leads to the main thing as well. It's that emotional accessibility as well. So we can sort of, again, appreciate what nature is around us. We can sort of appreciate also that sometimes when gardening, people might be hesitant because they think that things might go wrong. We can accept that, but also it's about noticing that gardening is a forgiving medium to work in. And then so we're working, we can sort of learn from our mistakes. It's also accepting that like gardening at all times of the year might not be for everyone. So looking out the window now, it's sort of coming up for winter. And sometimes, I'm not as ready to go out and do weeding or do digging and such at this time of year, but and that's actually okay. So it's gardening when you feel like you want to do it. And I think gardening is a very broad subject as well. There's lots of different things we can do. So it's finding things that you feel most capable of doing. So not having to take on every bit of gardening, because at the end of the day, we're all different. We respond to different things. So that's the Get Gardening website. And as you can see at the end there's the training education consultancy, which I'm part of as well. And so, sort of doing that other training and sort of helping people realize what benefits gardening can provide. On that note, these are the benefits that gardening can provide. And you can see we have the physical benefits first. And so when we think of gardening, we don't have to go rushing out and digging over a new bed. It could be that instead we can just go out and perhaps do some light deadheading with our fingers. Sometimes for me,
thank you.
Sometimes for me it's sort of like deadheading, or having a raised planter, so I can do some light weeding with my fingers. So I don't have to go and sort of saw a tree down or anything like that, but instead we can find sort of light activity. And even sometimes that sort of passive approach, where it's just going for a walk in the park as well, is physical exercise. And often at Thrive, when working with groups, we'll just go for a walk around the park, and people often thinking they're getting away from sort of active tasks, we're actually still having activity, still having that social interaction with each other while appreciating nature as well. We can also think about the psychological benefits of gardening, and that sort of idea of how we can nurture through gardening. And I think, when working in Thrive Project, we had many people who had no experience of sort of being able to nurture and generally spent a lot of time being looked after themselves. Whereas at Thrive, we could have sort of people nurturing plants, looking after things, and that choice that working with plants allowed them. So at the beginning of the day, putting up a list of options of what to do on the board, and people could go out and sort of choose what they want to do and have their own volition, which is really important. And also that value they felt through achievement at the end of the day. So, through most gardening tasks, we can see a result from what we've done, whether it be sort of sweeping up a path or just planting a bulb and seeing coming up later in the spring. And through that, we can also develop confidence. Gardening is also full of metaphors. So when we're weeding, it might be we sort of cast our mind to our own lives and what we're going through. And it might be we sort of reflect the fact that we are removing things we don't want from our lives, or we're making space for something so we can look after something else, as those weeds can sort of perhaps, sort of take nutrients away from a plant. Or even, as we say, we're sort of removing weeds, we can therefore plant something else and make way for new things to come along. I'm currently at the minute cutting back my artichoke plant in the garden, which is big and leggy and needs to be cut down, as it's got sort of lots of dead growth on it. That will go on to provide lots of nutrients and lots of food for bugs and insects and help biodiversity. Also at the bottom of the artichoke, there's lots of new green growth coming up. So I can appreciate even now that yes, winter's coming, it might be a time for sort of going indoors, and for some people it might be a time for struggle, but actually spring will come and that plant will redevelop. So again, we can see some strong metaphors through the plants we have in our garden. We then have the social side of things. And for some, it's the idea of, sort of that interaction, working alongside someone, not working face to face, so they feel happier talking about things while they're working. Or even sometimes that social side of perhaps a crop swap, or sort of growing something you can give to somebody else. Gardeners are generally very interested in what they're doing, and even that sort of short talk with Aaron at the beginning of this call let me know that actually maybe I will go and sort of forage for wild garlic, maybe I will go and look for things at a certain time of year. We're always sort of giving information and socially sort of passing on what we're doing as well. But also gardening is a time, if you want to sort of draw away from social activity, to just take yourself away and just have time alone in the garden doing a job you feel like wanting to do, and so instead maybe just connecting with the plants you're working with. Learning as well is a great part of gardening, as we can sort of always learn, how to do things better. Sometimes it might be we're learning from our mistakes, but often we're learning from others as well through that social interaction. So we can sort of do gardening and sort of appreciate what we're doing, sort of looking through books, but also learning from each other. When sometimes in Thrive, that sort of social interaction, sometimes people are just learning to be a good friend, or learning how to control their anger and stuff through being in nature and being outside. And last, and perhaps most importantly, is that access to the environment, because none of this would be possible without being in green spaces and being around plants. So we make sure we do appreciate the environment we're around. And often for me, that would be one of the main things I try and put forward to those I was working with. So appreciating seasonal change and what's happening around us. So now we're in autumn, so we can see that sort of lower light coming from the sun. We can see the difference, the change of the leaves. And for some of us, it might be just kicking through leaves as we walk through a park and stuff like that. Apparently those leaves release endorphins, so they can make us happy. So it's certain biological changes that happen through being in nature. And I think, certainly when I was working as well with people with mental health issues, there'd be a case of, sort of appreciating what was in the park. And then when people walked home, they could perhaps look in the people's front gardens, they did so, and see what was growing, see what was developing throughout the season, and sort of have a greater appreciation of that, which perhaps they didn't sort of appreciate quite as much before. Brilliant. I'm taking no questions so far. We can then connect these to the NF5 Ways to Wellbeing. So this was developed by sort of focus groups. I think it's used by Mind. And we can see that generally the stuff that I sort of talked about, the Thrive 5 that we talked about earlier, do connect nicely into this. So again, we've got that idea of connection, whether it be sort of connecting with other people, say in an allotment or within your sort of community, or even if it's that connecting to nature, as I said, and so developing a relationship with plants and with nature yourself. We've got to be active. And again, we don't have to be massively active. For somebody, it might be spending a Sunday just going around their house, watering the plants and making sure that they're sort of in good nick, and perhaps just doing a sort of picking off some of the dead leaves off geranium or a pelargonium in their own home. We've also got the opportunity to learn, which I talked about earlier within Thrive, and how there's lots of opportunity for learning and sort of discovering new things through nature. We can then give, and as I said, that could be sort of growing vegetables that we can give to a neighbor, making chutney for ourselves or other people we know, and giving time as well to plants, and making sure that we can sort of appreciate plants and appreciate the plants we have around us and look after them properly. And then lastly, as I said, sort of linking really nicely into that sort of appreciating the environmental benefits, is paying attention. And sometimes just having sort of time out to think about our sensorial, how we can benefit from gardens and such like that, whether it be the sight of a passion flower this time of year, or the sound of bees is sort of buzzing around in ivy this time of year as well. So that paying attention to what's going on around us and having a sort of a deeper understanding of the wider world around us and perhaps our part within it. This shows as well, which is nice, that we have, well, for me, it's nice to break things down to very simplistic terms, but we have here the natural environment, which is kind of, like I said, one of the key parts of what we're sort of looking at here, green spaces, our own gardens, or even just, the plants we have in our own house. We've got this activity or occupation, which for some people might just be wandering out of their garden, sitting on a bench, and sort of, that would be the activity itself. It doesn't have to be the digging as illustrated in this image here. And then we've also got that social environment, or that sort of how we can connect with other people through our gardening and such like that. And I think, important to remember that all these three things are happening at once. So gardening is, in essence, holistic in nature. So we can sort of see all these benefits happening at the same time. The example I like to use for this is if somebody's having issues with manual dexterity of their hands, they might be recommended using a squash ball, and they can sort of squeeze that squash ball, they can walk around holding it, and that would be a benefit. But through gardening, we can perhaps have them doing deadheading. So they can take some secateurs and they can go out into a garden or into a green space and so deadhead cosmos or roses. And so they've got that occupation, they've got that sort of access to the natural environment around them. And then they might work alongside somebody who sort of tells them about what they're doing, can teach them more about what they're doing, or even they can sort of show somebody else themselves how that task can properly be carried out. So we can see that all these three things happening at the same time through gardening. I'm just going to explain a little bit some of the theories that let us know that nature is beneficial to us. One of these is biophilia, which is the biophilia effect, and that's the theory that explains why nature is so therapeutic. So bio means life, and philia is love of. So we can see there we have this like natural love of life around us, and we have an almost genetic response to greenness. So certainly in this country, when we see green spaces, one of the things it might let us know is that we are safe. And this is often because green means there's water. I think also, so we can look at our history as a human race and see that we've always been connected to nature. So if we would take the timeline of the human race being on Earth, if we sort of look at it from being from Monday to Sunday, I believe if you go all the way through the week from Monday, and then at Sunday at lunchtime, so at 12 o'clock, that's when we become less nomadic. We have the agricultural revolution. We start to sort of break away from sort of wandering around, but we sort of become more focused on staying in one place. I think it's then about 11 o'clock on Sunday evening. That's when some of us actually sort of we move into houses or sort of high-rise flats. We start to sort of break away completely from our connection with nature. So it sort of naturally means that we are tied to nature. And I think there's proof as well that we sort of respond to the patterns in leaves and the patterns in flowers as well. It has a sort of positive effect on us. Another thing to think about when sort of going out for walks in nature is the attention restoration theory, and that's that nature is inherently fascinating and stimulating and promotes recovery from mental fatigue. So I think they did tests where they said if you had 3 20-minute breaks every day, it helped with mental fatigue, and so you'd be able to like help with with reading and such like that, and so it would help you sort of recompose yourself and such like that. So we can see that nature has a real positive effect in that way as well. And this is from being away is one way it does that. So we can sort of go out, and I think yesterday I went to a garden and I found a bench that was sort of enclosed by some rosemary and I think some lavender on the other side. And I could feel like I was very far away from my office, which was just 50 meters away from me, or even sort of finding a field or a green space or a walled garden that sort of allows us to sort of mentally remove ourselves from any issues we might be having outside. We've got extent in that idea of fascination with plants around us. And again, if you sort of think about the Fibonacci sequence in a sunflower, where you've got the seeds all sort of spiraling in like that, or sort of sometimes for me, it's that lifting a snowdrop's head and looking inside and seeing the patterns, those sort of fine patterns within there. We've then got soft fascination, which is involuntary passive interaction with plants around us, or sometimes just not plants, but sort of things we find in green spaces. So that could be perhaps how we sort of run our hands along lavender flowers when we see them. It could be that sound of a fountain, or even just a flag flapping. That something sort of grabs our attention and just draws us in to what's going on while we're outside. And lastly, there's compatibility, and that's the accessibility of users' needs and desires. And so for me, this sometimes links into perhaps my past and things I recognize from my past that sort of draw me in straight away and sort of connect me to that moment in my life. So for me, it's the smell of tomatoes on the vine will remind me very much of being my grandfather's glass house and such like that, or even seeing carp will remind me of being in that garden space. Or even another one is, as a maintenance gardener, I find it hard to walk past someone's front garden and look at their hedge without thinking, would I have trimmed it that way? Or sort of just want to put my hand out and sort of feel how close they've managed to get that hedge in. So it's that sort of very personal part of nature that can sort of draw us in and sort of, again, draw our attention away from what might be going on outside. Brilliant. We're now going to talk about bringing nature indoors. I was going to do a quick demonstration, if that's okay with everyone. So I was going to show you some sort of gardening tasks you can do in your own house and hopefully sort of break them down a little bit. So I don't know how many of you do gardening yourself, but let me just angle my camera. So first of all, does that work?
Yeah, would you like to unshare your screen for a moment, Mark, so that you can go full screen for people while you do this?
Okay, yes, that's a brilliant idea. Thank you. How are we keeping on time? I'm aware we've got a comfort break coming up. I don't want to eat into that too much.
No, we're fine. You go right ahead. This looks like it's going to be an interesting part of it.
Okay. So what I tried to do here is take sort of gardening tasks and then break them down a little bit. So we've got here a seed tray, but what I've done is I've taken a old takeaway plastic pot. I've got a screwdriver and heated it very gently and then punctured holes in it so the water can escape. So I think sometimes when we're doing gardening tasks, we can be quite overwhelmed by what we need to do it. I think sometimes it's a case of sort of breaking it down and thinking, well, actually, do we need all those things, or can we find some of these things just as easily at home? A classic example of that as well would probably be your yogurt pot, which you can sort of punch holes in the bottom and sort of have plants sitting in them as well. So I've got that. I've then got my compost here, as you can see. So I'm going to gently just layer that into my seed tray stroke takeaway box. I think when you're doing this as well, do bear in mind that when you're working with compost, it is full of small organisms. So I believe it's meant to be that in a teaspoon of compost, there are 8 billion microorganisms. And that's why sometimes when we're sort of working in Thrive, if somebody is taking the time just to gently put their hands in compost, sort of feel what's going on, it is because actually it is full of life. It is full of things that sort of, enrich the soil and help life as we sort of grow seeds and such like that. So there we go. Just doing that, getting a nice level. I've then got a tamper, or what I've got is got an old tissue box, cut it up, made it into a tamper, but also I've put sort of holes in there so I can use it as a seed sowing grid. So I'm just going to press that down a little bit. So I cut that down to the size of that. Just tidy up a little bit, not much. Lovely. I'm then going to take my basil seeds. Struggle to get in them originally. There we go. Place them in my hand. Just gently with my fingers, place them in the holes. And again, it doesn't matter if they don't all go in. As long as we're getting a few in each one, that's the main thing. As I said, gardening, a nice forgiving medium, lots of stages in which to learn. And again, we don't even really need the seed grid here. It's just, if you want to have a sort of a neater way of sowing, what you could also do is just remove the seed grid and just plant straight on top of the compost. So gardening can either be as complicated as you like or as uncomplicated. I think certainly my first experience of growing myself was when I lived in a sort of house share in Brixton, and we had a tomato plant growing out where the drain came out of our kitchen. So at first I didn't know what it was. Just going to place a few more there. There you go. So generally that's worked and gone in the right places. I'm then going to bring you back up very briefly. One of my favorite gardening tools, which is the bottle top waterer. So this is a plastic, small, almost like watering can type of thing, which makes it really good for watering plants indoors. Going back down again. So you can take that, you can attach it to an old Coke bottle. There you go, and just water that way. Or you can even just stand this in, an old baking tray or something like that until you feel that the compost is watered enough by sort of checking its weight. And if it's heavy, that probably means it's had enough water. And then again, without having to get a plastic label, I've got sort of a piece of card from an old tissue box, as we've all got colds this time of year, and just use that to write basil on, and that gets placed in that. And if you're up again. There. Good. Who wants to see another demonstration of gardening indoors? There, thanks, Jeanette. We're in.
Love it.
Okay, so this time we're going to do, for people who thought maybe sowing seeds looks a little bit complicated, then this time we're going to do bulbs instead. Bulbs are one of my favourite plants. Again, I said my history was going to art college. I quickly realised that with bulbs, I could give me all the sort of like crayons or chalks or paints you want. There's nothing I can create quite as beautiful as a tulip. So planting a bulb and having that sort of expectation, that waiting, was a task I sort of very much enjoyed. It's also really hard to get wrong. So I'm going to put you back down again. Here we go. So we got our pot there, which we're just going to fill probably about 1/3. Give it a little pat. Again, enjoying that compost on our fingers. We're then going to take our bulbs. I think in this case, it does say sort of plant, give it a space to, but I think we could probably get about 3 bulbs in there. Here we go. These are tete-a-tete, so these are sort of daffodils, but a smaller version. When thinking about therapeutic plants, I think, bulbs are a good one, but also for sort of a plant that sort of lots of people connect with, you might want to think about your dandelion as well, because who doesn't love blowing seed heads off a dandelion or sort of have some sort of memory of doing that as a child? Here we go. It doesn't even have to be that far edge of the ground. I'm going to leave some bulbs in there because I'm also fairly sure that when my kids come back from school, they'll probably enjoy planting bulbs as well. So that's bulb planting. And the next one, the task that sometimes I find hard, is propagating. So I went out to the garden earlier and picked some mint, but also what you can use is just mint from the shop. So buying packaged mint, or sort of, a little pot of mint yourself. You can take that, find a nice, there you go, that's quite a nice stalk there. Pick off the bottom few. So you leave the stalk, and you want to have these nodes there. What I'm going to do is just cut below a node. That's where the energy is. Leaving these top leaves there. You can therefore take them, just remove the little top bit of the top bit there, and place that in a glass of water. And that's, so a quick demonstration of how you can do gardening at home. Other things you can do is with houseplants, see if you've got little sort of new growth coming from your spider plants or money plants and such like that. You can sort of take them out, repot them, and you can give them to friends as well. So gardening does provide lots of activities like that. The other thing I wanted to mention as well is that we do have a resource called Sow to Grow, which gives lots of advice on sort of growing indoors. It's got things like bean growing, so we can have a bean growing competition. It's got advice on bulb planting. It's got flower pressing, and it's got planting alpine containers. I was going to quickly show you it quickly. And also, I've been told from my boss that I can give it out. So it's a PDF. So if people want it, I can sort of send it to Aaron or do email me personally, and I can sort of make sure you can get it. I'll just give you a demonstration of what it is now.
Amazing. I'd love to share that with people afterwards.
Right. That's, if you've enjoyed this, then there is more. And here's the Sow to Grow resource book. And as I said, it's got what's in a bean, competition beads, sowing seeds all year round, grow your own. So hopefully this gives some good advice as to gardening activities. And like I said, I checked with my boss and we are allowed to give this out.
That looks like such a great resource. Thank you.
That's okay. Let's say there's a PDF and there's the things you might need. We can look through what's in a bean, and hopefully sort of nice, sort of varying in complexity sort of tasks you can do. But it's all about bulbs, sowing seeds all year round, and what you might need. As you can see there, some of these resources you can make yourself. The seed sowing grid, that is something you can devise at home, and you can find ways of watering. It means you don't have to sort of lug a big watering can around your house. So sort of different ways of working this. Growing your own sensitive plants. So again, that sort of interaction, that fascination we can promote within ourselves. And I think that's a really nice example there of the plant, where sort of we touch the leaves and they sort of go in again, don't they? It's a mimosa. Edible seeds as well. So just learning more about nature around us and and what it provides, and how we can sort of grow them on ourselves. Good. I hope that helps.
Looks like a fantastic resource. Do you mind if I just ask you something quickly, Mark?
Yes.
You and actually, when I've spoken with some of your colleagues as well, there's a mention you make of gardening being forgiving, and I think that's a lovely concept. I was wondering if you would mind elaborating for people what you mean by that.
Yeah, certainly. I think the reason, I think it's one of the things that I've sort of really been pushing at. I think it came back from a story when I was doing maintenance gardening and I managed to drive a sit-down mower into a bed, and I thought, well, that's it. We've lost it. That bed is. I've done everything I can to destroy it, and actually, it wasn't. We sort of managed to. I think we had to replant some of the boxes, but the other plants we could just replace, or over time, so it just grew back naturally themselves, and it sort of led me to believe that actually you can't really make a mistake in gardening. Obviously, if I sort of cast my mind, I think it would involve quite a lot to take an area of green space and really, really ruin it. We can always find things, sort of growing through, succeeding, or it's a chance for relearning. And I think it's important to remember that, gardening is a forgiving medium. And I'm working with people with disabilities, it's about sort of learning and developing, but we can also, sort of develop the way we work. So if we're unsure of what we're doing, we can grow things like radishes or beans and stuff like that, and we can sort of develop these skills as we go along. Just sort of being aware of that. But I think my main, if anyone's got, please do put in the comments if you can think of a way to really ruin a green space. I think it involves paraffin in a match.
Yeah, it does find a way to come back, doesn't it?
Yes. Nature does find a way.
And something I've made peace with myself is, sometimes a house plant just isn't suited to my house. It might not be the right space for it, but something else will work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And moving them around as well.
Yes.
Finding
So I think a little bit of time to sort of move things around, see where they're most happy. That does really pay off. And talking to other people as well, and sort of finding out what other people do, and sort of enabling that sort of conversation and learning from others is really nice as well.
So lots of requests for links and things, which we put in the chat. We'll also follow up in our post-event email with useful links and information that's been shared in this session. One thing, and you've been busy presenting, Mark, but one thing that's come through for me is just the different ways that carers have been sharing how they're gardening, what they're doing, and how it sort of enhances their lives. So lots of little tips and hints shared as well, which is brilliant. There was talk of sharing vegetables that are grown when you've got too many, which is I think a wonderful way to enjoy a bit of pride in what you do.
Yeah.
Exchanging cuttings is something that some friends and I have done as well. Is there anything sort of like that, Mark, that you think can be like a social aspect to embarking on doing gardening?
I think sometimes just gardeners are generally interested in what each other are doing. I've got somebody who I sort of pass on the way home, and I think our relationship is basically about what our gardens are, what's happening in our gardens. And I think once we sort of did take the time to actually visit each other's spaces, see what's going on, learn from each other, whether it be, do I need to make this bed wider for these plants? What can I have growing up this trellis? I really want to have some cyclamen in here, but I don't know if it's going to work. And so that sort of increased, that sort of, renewed interest through talking to other people. It's like any job, if you're talking to someone who's not really that interested in it, you sort of lose interest yourself. But if you sort of meet someone who shares your interest, who wants to sort of carry on doing the same work you're doing, it's really, really beneficial. And I think things such as, sort of sharing courgettes, sharing or things we're growing from the garden, taking sort of perhaps like growing a sweet pea and taking the flowers and sort of putting them in your living room so people can see them when you come in. You can sort of, share that experience through that as well. There's lots of, value in that sort of bringing that outdoors indoors and sort of sharing it with others.